if there's one thing I could know, you could probably never ask this, but I'd like to know what's their budget? What do they actually spend money on? And we started asking people like, would you want to know that? And everyone was like, oh yeah, well, like if you could find that out, yeah, absolutely. Like of course I would want to know that. No one ever says that though. One of the things I've learned about him that's good for finding those moments is sometimes you come to a place in an interview and you think, huh, that's weird what they just said. Yeah. And your natural instinct sometimes is to be like, I'm not going to ask about that because it's weird. I don't understand it. I actually don't know if maybe I misunderstood them. And so you skip over it. Sam has no problem looking like an idiot. And so he's always going like, wait, what?
Announcement coming very, very soon. I thought we were going to be able to do the announcement yesterday, but there's still some details in there. But stay tuned. Probably the best news that we've had since we launched the show. I think so. So
there, yeah,
just gonna put it out there. So stay tuned. I'm ready, Fonzie. Are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready.
Sounds good. We see thumbs up in the back. All right, cool. Let's make this happen. Hey, I'm Luis.
And I'm Luis.
And you're listening to the Content is Profit podcast,
where we talk about entrepreneurship, mindset, and of course, how to turn your content into profit.
Baby, that's right. But most importantly, we are here to have a good time with you. So go to contentsprofit.com to get started today and join the community.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty smooth.
So smooth.
Good job.
I practiced like 20 times.
I'm glad you did, guys. And today we have an incredible guest. We're very excited for today's guest.
Yes.
And we're talking all about taking over the podcasting world.
Oh, baby.
I know. I think honestly, this is a very general headline now that I read it. I kind of wanted to do like a little gameplay in there with, the name of his podcast too.
I know.
But at the same time, he's so knowledgeable about the podcasting world that this conversation can just go whatever. And I know it's going to be extremely valuable.
I know. So keep an eye on that clock, Fonzie, because you keep asking questions and then, we stay here 24 hours. So I'm just going to put that out there. But tell me, do we have a sponsor today, Fonz?
Indeed, we do. Good question, good sir. And today's sponsor is your own, the BIZBROS. Yes, we sponsor our own podcast with Content Momentum. And you might be asking yourself, what is Content Momentum? Well, if you produce a long-form piece of content just like this one that you're listening to or watching, and you need a fractional content team to help you out and produce daily consistent content, we are here to help you out. So slide in the DMs at BIZBROS Co on Facebook, Instagram.
I just heard content and then this. Oh, beautiful. That sounds delicious. Guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, go ahead and follow the show on your favorite platform because every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays, awesome episodes are dropping with incredible value so you can move your business and life forward.
That is right. And if today's guests help you move one step closer towards your goal, please don't forget to share this episode and leave a 5-star review. Thank you.
That's right. We are back with another epic guest. We connected with today's guest after sliding in his DMs, and he's one of the responsible ones for growing one of our favorite podcasts to 2 million monthly downloads. Let's go.
Right. Even though he hosts his own podcast, How to Take Over the World, which is an absolute gem, he seems to be more of a behind-the-scenes guy, the guy in the chair, the mastermind behind the madness.
That's right. And he's not just the mastermind behind a $2 million downloads per month podcast. He's the mastermind behind Caspian Studios, a podcast as a service company specifically designed for B2B marketing teams.
Conclusion: he knows what he's talking about. Please welcome host of How to Take Over the World podcast, the Alexander the Great of podcasting, and possibly the best podcast producer that has ever graced this earth, Ben Wilson!
Man, guys, I don't know what to say about that intro. That was too generous. Too generous.
Ben,
it's only fair. It's only fair.
And you have no idea how happy we are to have you here in the show, man. I'm not kidding. Like, How to Take Over the World and My First Million are like the top 2 podcasts in our rotation. And we're like, we need to have the mastermind behind all this in the show.
Yeah, we've been... go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say the warm feelings go both ways, because that's the best 30 seconds of a podcast, the best first 30 seconds of a podcast I've ever been on. That was incredible. I feel like a king right now.
Yeah, let's go.
Well, you are indeed Alexander the Great. So
we're like, so yeah, Ben. You know, I wanna tell the story a little bit on like obviously how I guess first got in touch with you, and by the way, thank you for accepting the invitation. You know, but we've been massive fans of My First Million for a while now, and then I love how they interact, and then started to like bring you in, right? And I'm gonna talk a little bit about the strategy also on the content. Like we love a lot of YouTube stuff, and it's like these characters, right, within like this ecosystem. And then you showed up, and then they put one of your episodes in there, and I was like, what is this? This is awesome. So then when you came on with your own episode onto their platform, I immediately went into and checked out other episodes, and I fell in love with how you tell a story, right? And so maybe down the show we can talk a little bit about your creation, your process on how you do this. But I've never read like a history book. I've never like I fell asleep in my history classes. And how you tell these stories and how you relate it to the day-to-day, especially a little bit on, you know, that spice in the entrepreneurship world and like people that want to like make a difference, it really attracted me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool. And like very different styles of shows, but at the same time, really, really high quality and highly engaging. So I'm like, we have to talk to this guy. And, you know, I heard that you're our first Twitter DM connection, may I add, in 245 episodes. So you got the crown for that. So thank you. I just wanted to like give a little bit of context on how we got in touch with you, and it's so awesome. And so thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here and excited for the conversation.
Sweet.
Awesome, Ben. So for those that don't know who Ben is, right? Maybe they don't know a little bit about your podcast, or you know what all those facts, even though they should know at this point who the Alexander the Great of podcasting is, right? Why don't you share a little bit about your story? You get to where you are right now. Like maybe how did you fall in love with podcasting and this craft of storytelling?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go, but actually the story starts in a very funny place, which was I actually started my career in management consulting. I did that for 2.5 years, then did tech marketing. And then I had a trainer I was working with at the gym, and he said, "You have a really good voice. Have you ever thought about doing radio?" And I said, "Nah, like I don't think. First of all, no, that's not what I do for a living. Second of all, I don't think there's a lot of money in it." He goes, "Well, my dad works in radio. You should talk to him about it." And so I said, "Okay, whatever." And so I talked to his dad, and his dad said, "Yeah, you have a great voice. You should consider like doing something in it if you have anything to say. By the way, I'm retiring. Do you want all my equipment?" And I was like, I don't think I'm actually going to do this, but yeah, I'll take your equipment. So I had all this nice like professional radio equipment sitting around. And then a few years later, I'm listening to the Tim Ferriss show. I don't know if you guys like Tim Ferriss, but I was listening to the Tim Ferriss show, and he just had a few episodes in a row where I was just like wasn't thrilled about the guests. And I thought, well, who do I wish Tim Ferriss could interview? And I realized, it's people that aren't alive. I wish he could go back in time and interview like Alexander the Great or Napoleon or Caesar or Steve Jobs or something like that. And so I thought, well, I could do that. I could start that podcast. I was reading a biography at the time. And so I thought, well, I could make that. And I realized, I have this radio equipment this guy gave me. So like, why don't I just try recording it and see how it goes? So I started it because I was doing the reading anyway, and it seemed like it'd be fun and interesting. From there, I got married. My wife was going to law school. I was moving across the country, so I needed a new job. And I had started this podcast, just for fun in my spare time. I sent it to a few studios and said, "Hey, just listen to this. If you think it's any good, let me know if you want me to work for you." And one of them got back to me and was like, "Hey, we actually love your show. Do you want to come work for us?" Wow. So that was a company called Mission. I started working for them. And then from there, I left with one of their executives to start Caspian Studios. And then eventually the guys at My First Million, Sam Parr, heard How to Take Over the World. And he's been a big, big booster of it. They play it in their feed sometimes. And so that's how I got involved with them.
Yeah.
He just randomly found it in the podcasting app. So that's how I got to where I am today. That's the short version of it.
That's awesome. And I love like the the coincidence in life, that your trainer was this guy, and he's like, dude, you got a nice voice right there. And then all like this sort of events just folded out, and it's absolutely amazing. By the way, the first episode that they share about you, I think it was the Thomas Alva Edison. That was so good. I'm telling you, I was hooked to that thing. I think I listened to it a few times now, and I listen to my podcast on Air. I don't know if you're familiar with that player, but you can take like air quotes, what they call air quotes, which is you press a button and then it kind of like segments like 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes. And it saves it on my phone, and then I can just go back and like listen to those like golden nuggets. Man, and it's absolutely amazing. I was like, I've never heard such an engaging story like on a podcast like this, besides Business Wars, probably. I was like, this is the level of Business Wars. And just the way that you probably, I was just thinking, how did this guy did the research for this thing? How long did it take him to pull the whole story together, right? Like, he is a master of his craft, and I do want to dig into that a little bit.
Before you ask the question, there's two elements, Ben, that you said in there, like that we mentioned on the show before, is why not me, right? Like I think sometimes we go out there into the marketplace and we don't find the solution, whether that's a business or even like on content side of things, right? Like we love like individual frameworks. Like, what is your own framework of creation? So the fact that you like took action and be like, let's actually jump in and do this. And then going and being proactive about the opportunity that you went and got. You're like, I'm actually going to go and reach out to these people and see where the opportunity lays. Yeah.
Either one.
English is not very good looking.
I think either one works.
Good. So I think those two things are key, right? Because we share also in our show, like people are like, how do you guys get 3 guests a week? I'm like, we just go ask. So that's like, it's such an easy question, right? But I want to highlight it because sometimes that can get like shoveled under everything else. So super awesome. Fancy. Okay.
All right. Now it's my turn to ask the question. Before we go into like the research and all that thing that I think is, it's a must, right? Especially for people that want to produce high quality podcasts. I'm extremely curious now on your time at Mission, because I do know of that network. We've done research obviously to see what networks we would like to eventually work with, right? All this stuff. And they produce very high quality podcasts as well. So I'm curious, how was that transition for you and that learning process? Maybe what were some of the top things that you learned with them that now you're applying at your own Caspian Studios?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things, I came in and I was just a guy reading books, speaking into a microphone, right? And so I didn't know anything about how to structure the project of a podcast, right? How to take it from conception to completion. And more than that, like how to keep a schedule, right? How to deliver on time. I think that was probably the number one thing I learned is, there's an art to podcast production, any kind of content production, right? But there's also like the science of like, you need to be a professional, you need to put on your hard hat and grab your lunch pail, and like, you need to show up and things need to go out on time, right? And so I learned that when I was with Mission.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So for you, that process, what did it entail? Like, what are the elements? Like, for example, for us, when we decided to first start something, was a podcast called Brews and Bros. And it was debriefing this challenge that we were going through at the time at 10 p.m. at night with a beer, right? With 2 DSLRs. And there was so much friction because we had to set up for 30 minutes in Fonzi's room. It looked like a porn set. And, Fonzi's girlfriend would walk in and be like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, we're shooting a podcast. And like, good thing you guys are wearing t-shirts. Like, this looks like something very different. And we recorded 5 episodes, right? And it was just a lot of friction. And then we're like, oh crap, now we got to edit all this into the video, on the audio things. And then we have to distribute, and then we have to promote it. And it's just the mental challenge of going through that. What happened was after 5 recordings, we were like, no more. And then we spent a whole year without publishing. And then we decided to start Content is Profit, right when the pandemic hit. And it changed everything because one of the things that helped us was we removed all the friction. So what we're recording right now, this is how it's going to end up, and we structure ahead of time. So for us, that was like the secret recipe to produce and stay consistent. And it can get better, absolutely, 100%. But for us, the production and consistency is super important. So for you, like, what are some tips or frameworks that you might recommend to somebody that is starting a show, is starting their own platform? How can they get the ball moving quickly?
Yeah. So a few things. The first thing I would say is, like, the great thing about podcasting is it's easy to do. Like, sometimes people overemphasize that. Like, actually, there are things that are hard about it, right? But at the same time, like, spinning up a prototype, getting a couple episodes is like pretty simple, and you don't need to commit your life to this right away, right? Like, it's okay to produce a couple episodes. Like you guys said, like, you started things up and then like didn't really like start releasing for a year or whatever. Like, if you if it doesn't sound right, like, I think more people should orient themselves towards, like, actually, I'm going to start 10 podcasts, and then if one of them sounds really good when I produce it, I'm going to keep producing it. So, like, take away that fear of failure is what I would say. Like, failure is good. You want to at least be out there. You want to be trying. And that was one of the things I learned also at Mission and later with Caspian, is like, not every show's a hit. And guess what? That's okay. You know, you gotta still go out there and like be taking swings, because you never know what's going to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we like to don't call it failures anymore. It's just learning, right? At the end of the day, which each one of those
samples,
those steps that you might misplace, you're just learning something new, taking new samples, and then course correcting. So that is extremely important. I love the whole thing, managing the projects, right? I think always having a plan can be a big advantage. I think when we first started this, we did not have a plan. It was like, let's just start recording, go live, see where we go. And then on episode 20, we're like, well, we don't have anything else to say. What about we invite one of our good friends and we talk with him? And that led to, the people that we're bringing into the show are people that we would love to work with. Like, what an incredible tool to build relationships, to build your network, right? And that's how, for us, it became about now creating that bigger plan. Like, okay, let's do 3 times a week. We're going to bring this type of guest, and we're going to leverage that for the business, right? So now I know you're in the B2B podcasting space, and you guys, I check your site, I check some of this podcasts that you guys are doing at Caspian, and they're like extremely high quality. And I'm curious, right? Because for what we've been exposed, it's very difficult to grow the audience size. It's very challenging. And we have Steph Smith, right, in the previous episode. And she was talking about, like, yes, it is very challenging, even for some businesses. Like she said, I would even discourage them to actually start a podcast, right? So I'm curious to hear from you. What are those reasons, or what's a good scenario that a business should start a podcast with? Like, for what reasons should they start a podcast?
Yeah. Look, I think, you know, for example, at Caspian, we had a show that was about edge computing, right? All about edge computing. And it never got more than a couple thousand downloads per episode, and it was a huge success because there just aren't that many people who are interested in edge computing. Like, it was for hardcore technologists who are working on edge computing. I don't even, like, I produce the show, I don't even fully know what edge computing is. Like, I can't explain it all to you, right? And so that's the first thing, is like, you have to know the scope of what you're going for. And you have to be, and then the other thing is, like, if it's a B2B podcast, you should probably either be in your target market, like you should be trying to target people like yourself, or if not, you should talk a lot to people who are in your target market and ask them, like, A, what do they want to hear? But not only what do they want to hear, but what do they want to hear that they're not currently hearing? So, for example, one show that we produced, Demand Gen Visionaries, is really interesting. The whole show has been made by one question that we ask every time. It's because it's for specifically demand gen marketers. So we went and we talked to all these demand gen marketers, and we asked them, like, if you could know one thing from great demand gen marketers, what would you want to know? And they were like, at first they were like, honestly, like there is enough content out there about like demand gen marketing. Like there's not anything else I want to hear. And then we had one person go, though, if there's one thing I could know, you could probably never ask this, but I'd like to know what's their budget? What do they actually spend money on? And we started asking people like, would you want to know that? And everyone was like, oh yeah, well, like if you could find that out, yeah, absolutely. Like of course I would want to know that. No one ever says that though. And so we made that our key focus of like, hey, well, if you come on the show, you don't have to break down every number, but we're going to ask you what your top 3 budget items are that you actually spend money on, that you would never cut. And so people come on and they share that, and demand gen marketers love it because that's like the one thing that you never hear is like, what do you actually spend money on? What would you never cut? And so I think that's another framework we use.
Yes, that is an amazing question.
That's very powerful.
I'm gonna pull a reverse card right now, Ben, and I'm gonna ask you, if you, and I'm guessing you might actually listen to a podcast about podcasting, right? Let's say content is profit, and there's something that you want to know that you are not hearing. What would it be? Like, what is that question about podcasting that maybe nobody's asking?
What would I want to know about podcasting that I don't already hear? Well, I think I think that there is a lack of content around how to craft good podcast narrative. Because most podcasters do interview style, and there's a ton of content. A lot of people have written a lot about how to be a good interviewer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot about how to write well. There's just not that much about how to write well specifically for podcasting, like how to craft a narrative.
Yeah.
And that is, I'm in a unique space in that I do have How to Take Over the World. I do have a scripted podcast, and most people aren't scripted.
Yeah.
But I think even if you're not scripted, that idea of like, how do I craft a narrative out of this? Like not just not just an interview, but how do I actually tell it as a story would be helpful to a lot of podcasters.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that, how you phrase that. And actually one of our first challenges when we started our podcast was the questionnaire normal. Like, what if in the middle of the conversation, we don't have anything else to add? We don't have anything else to say, right? And we actually, so we have what we call the cheat sheet right here that we're looking at it right now. And, there's this, it's called the Epiphany Bridge framework, right? To tell stories. I don't know if you're familiar with the direct response marketing world. I think it's Joseph Campbell. He has the Hero of the Thousand Journeys, I think it is called. And this framework, the Epiphany Bridge framework, is based on that, right? So we wrote those questions in here.
A good example could be, have you watched the movie Cars?
Well, but I was going to dive a little bit into the framework, so I know, could give a little bit of context.
Okay, but you can do that in just a second. But it will be like, if you look like behind, like that's the structure of that movie. So what happens, like the episodes that happen in that movie is the journey. And as soon as you start seeing it, Hitch is another good example. Then you're like, oh my gosh, all these movies are using this framework of narrative. And they're like, okay, sweet. That's how we like saw it for the first time, and we're like, oh, okay, that's cool. So those are the questions at FONZI.
Yeah, so it's pretty much, and I'm gonna run super fast through this, but it's the backstory, right? Then the external and internal desires of the character. Then the wall, right? What is that challenge that they face that they almost, quit for their dream? Then comes the epiphany. What is that one thing that they realize that they could do to achieve their dreams? And then they build a plan. And then it's conflict, and they go back. Conflict and action, and then eventually they achieve what they want. But with that achievement, there's a transformation, right? So, for example, in the Cars example that my brother is sharing, Lightning McQueen, I think is, and you can actually tell this better because you watched the movie like 20 times.
Here's why. I have a 2-year-old, so the movie is on repeat every single day. So at the end of the movie, right, like the obsession is he wants to win the Piston Cup, right? And at the end of the movie, he had got, for those that haven't watched it, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, he has the chance to actually win it. But then one of the competitors has an accident, and what he does is like he pulls the brakes at the very end and then drives back and push these guys past the finish line, like not finishing first but third. But then, you know, it was the great transformation from that obsession to that cup to a better racer, a better person, right? So it's really, once we start distilling those things, it's pretty awesome because it opens your eyes to new formats. Now, I think this is probably where FONZI wanted to go. Like for your How to Take Over the World show, like how do you create your own narrative? Like you started that from scratch. So how was that process for you? Because in my mind, when I think about that, it feels like a lot of heavy lifting, to be completely honest. And maybe it's because my capacity is spent in different areas of the business as well, right? So I'm reducing friction in some areas to be able to execute on others. But for you, when you developed your own show, and I feel like people have to go listen to it. We'll put the link right below. It to me, it was very unique, right? And it was like, oh, this is so cool. This is so him. Like I'd never seen a show like that before. So I'm like, okay, how do you come up with that? Was like you sat down one day and were like, I'm gonna do this once, or have you developed it over time?
Yeah, so I definitely have developed it over time. The first time I did it, I didn't have any framework for how to develop a story. I just kind of like read the biography and then just kind of told the story. Over time, I have developed a framework. I think Hero's Journey is great. I think a lot of more people should read Joseph Campbell and should implement Hero's Journey. Now, I'm a little bit constrained because I don't actually get to develop my own stories, right? I'm telling other people's stories, real history. And so the story is what it is. And if it doesn't follow Hero's Journey, it doesn't follow Hero's Journey per se. Obviously, there's always some overlap, but it's not always
absolutely
airtight. My main framework that I use is, and I can go through a little more process of how I actually tactically do it, but the overall framework I use is I read these biographies, and as I do, there are usually 4 or 5 moments where like a light bulb goes off. And either I'm just reading it and I'm like, this is so cool. And I just like can't wait to tell, like I literally am just looking around like, is my wife nearby? Can I tell her this? Like, can I tell her this story? This is so cool. I want to tell someone about this. Or it's an insight. I make a connection and I go, whoa, like this is going to change my life. I'm going to do things differently because of what I'm learning about this person. And so then I build everything around those light bulb moments of I give them space to breathe a little bit, but also like I go through, I kind of write out their whole story, but I'm not scared to just kind of yada, yada, yada to like take stuff out if it's not one of those big moments, right?
Yeah.
Like everything in between, I don't want to get too detailed because I'm really just spacing it out and getting you to that big moment. I can give you a few examples of that if you want, but I really try and center it around those.
Okay, now that I reverse engineer, like Steve Jobs one, I loved it. Walt Disney, so good. And I'm like, okay, now that you mentioned it, I'm reverse engineering it, and it makes total sense because like as you were like building that story in my mind, I'm probably your perfect like audience member too, because like, you know, it's first is like something new, but also we're in this world where we can apply these lessons, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Why don't we do this and this and this? That's one of the things I enjoy the most is that you actually do a really good job at relating that to the day-to-day. It's like, okay, how can we see that today? What is the lesson that we can learn here, right? One of probably the lesson that has stuck the most with me has been the fact, and I think you mentioned this in multiple ones, is that all these successful people, they are not just successful because of their level of intelligence, but it's mostly because of their levels of their energy, right? You're like, all these successful people just like have very high levels of energy and they're like, go, go, go. And I'm like,
I need to get my 8 hours of sleep. I need to go to bed early.
Yeah, you do.
Well, you guys are on the right track because man, this is the most energy I've felt on a podcast in a long time. You guys got high energy.
You don't see behind the table here, but you see the bucket of caffeine that FONZI just chugged before the show.
Yeah, but I love them, and I personally would love to dig a little bit deeper on that, right? Like that you just mentioned, like if we can go a little bit deeper on, some examples of what you've done, because I think it could be very valuable for those people, even if they're doing interview style. I think just knowing the fact that you can have a narrative to it, it's pretty important, right? There's a reason why we always start with, tell me a little bit of your backstory, right? We want to learn where the hero, the guest, is coming from, and then yes, maybe we deviate a little bit here and there as we're speaking, but that makes the person listening connect with them on a deeper level. Like, oh, okay, cool. They're actual humans too. They're not this just superstars, the best producer to ever grace planet Earth, right?
That sounds like a superstar to me. I'm just gonna put that out there.
So yeah,
I think one of the things you're making me think of is like, I think sometimes with interviews, if I'm using this framework of like, what are the big insights? Sometimes people treat their interviews like they're walking a dog, okay? Like they're driving cattle. Like we're just going to keep it moving, and I want the whole thing moving, and I want the whole thing to be good, okay? If I have two movies, okay, one movie is good. The whole thing is good. Nothing's great, nothing's bad. The whole thing is good, okay? I show you this movie, and it's good. The next movie I show you is actually horrible. It's awful. But in the middle of it, 30 minutes into the movie, is literally the funniest scene you have ever seen in a movie, okay? You are dying laughing. And then the rest of the movie is horrible again.
Yeah.
Which one of those are you more likely to tell your friends about, right? You're not going to tell them about the movie that was fine the whole time. You're going to tell them about the movie that was horrible, and then hilarious, and then horrible again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why those moments are so important. And so I think people need to treat it less like they're walking their dog and more like they're a treasure hunter, right? Like it can be awkward. It's okay if you hem and you haw. It's okay if you skip over the boring stuff. And sometimes you have to ask the boring stuff because you never know where like exciting insights are going to come from.
Yeah.
But like you're just looking for that moment. And then when you find it, you just dig, go. And you just got to get them to say whatever it is that they need to say in order for this to be A+++ content.
Oh, that's so good. Okay.
Is this our treasure moment right here?
Hold on. This is the golden boulder moment. Okay. This is so good. But I got the perfect example, right? So, by the way, you got the title for the person or the guest that my wife has listened the most ever. So she thinks that we just talk to the wall whenever we're in this studio, right? She's like, "What do you guys do?" And we're like, "Just talk to people." And we're like, "Yeah." So I've tried to convince her for the longest time. Hey, babe, like, do you listen to any of these shows or whatever? I'm like, I don't want to listen to you talking, man. I listen to you talking every single day. And so she's consumed one interview with a person that was in a high school musical movie, right? And that was the hook for her. And she's like, that's it. Out of 245 episodes, right? So today we had to go to the bank, and we're in the car, and I'm like, hey babe, like, do you mind if I put this episode? I need to do some homework. I need to listen to this person before we interview him, right? So I put one of the episodes that is not your episode, but it was somebody interviewing you, right? So I put the interview, you start sharing your story, and I'm listening here, and then she turns around and is like, is this what you guys do podcast? Is this what podcasting is? This is so boring, right? And I'm not going to say the name of the show, whatever, right? But for her, she's like, is this it? And I'm like, I know this is kind of painful. Let me try something different. So I put in the episode where you're with Sam and Sean, that you guys talk about the consulting, right? The consulting episode. And we start with that, and immediately the hook like grabs her, right? And she goes like, what? You can wait? And then she keeps listening to the story, and then you tell the story about the high rise and the guy with the background and the thing and the call, and she's like, oh my gosh. And then she's like, well, this sounds a lot better. And then it's like, so it's like, who's the guy that you're interviewing? Is the guy with the voice? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh my God,
voice.
yes, this is so good. I might listen to that one. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, finally, after 245 episodes, we got her. So I just need to say thank you for that. But that explains exactly what that is, right? Like the first example was like this interview that content-wise is useful. It could be things that, but it was like very flat, I guess, at that point. And, you know, to each their own. But maybe that was another thing that is attracted. And then I put my first million with your story, and it was all three of you interacting. It's a little bit more action-packed, and then the story and what happened here and what we're going to do. And I have to ask you, how's your venture there? if you change those opportunities. But like it got her invested in a person that's brand new to the platforms, right? And that's part of what it takes to grow an audience, to attract new people into your thing. And it's so important. So, this is so good. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for allowing me to share Katie's story. Cause like, you know, you got a new fan, by the way.
Good. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned like that interview that, or it wasn't an interview, I guess, but like Sam and Sean
interaction.
I was on the My First Million podcast, and you talked a little bit about that. And I think Sam and Sean, but specifically Sam, one of the things I've learned about him that's good for finding those moments is sometimes you come to a place in an interview and you think, that's weird what they just said. Yeah. And your natural instinct sometimes is to be like, I'm not going to ask about that because it's weird. I don't understand it. I actually don't know if maybe I misunderstood them. And so you skip over it. Sam has no problem looking like an idiot. And so he's always going like, wait, what? What do you mean by that? And so that was a great example of that.
Yeah,
because he was like, okay, you had a consulting opportunity. I get that. That happens a lot. You were talking to a rich guy. He wanted your advice. Wait, what? He wanted to know what Caesar would do in his circumstance? That's weird. you know? And so like he digs in on that weird thing. He like hits on that. Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah. Wow. That is actually a golden boulder right here. Yeah. Golden boulder moment.
Approved.
Yeah. But just so you know, golden boulders are like golden nuggets, just way bigger and way awesomer. So you might get.
We need to start sending helmets to the guests because like, man, you guys keep dropping these boulders on top. You know, it has to happen. We gotta protect.
Yes. This is absolutely amazing. And you know, talking about making it not like a walk on the dog, but more like a treasure hunting, right? This makes me also believe on asking good questions, right? Like how can I put myself in a scenario? And you mentioned one of these, which is, that's weird, right? Sam's lesson. But it's how can I put myself in a scenario to ask good questions, dig deeper, don't be afraid of judgment, right? Like, because I feel, just like you're saying, like people are afraid of maybe offending somebody along the line, and then it's just like flatline the podcast. So I'm curious, based on your experience with this B2B podcast, or, you know, crafting your own, I know you don't do interviews, but maybe you think to yourself, what would I ask to these people that I'm writing about, right? Like, how do you find those good questions that can become the golden boulders?
Yeah, so I don't host any interview style shows, but I do a ton of, or I have now I do it for My First Million. I don't do a ton of like actual like production work anymore at Caspian. I take more of a advisory role there, but I have done a ton of that, right? Of prepping people and trying to get them the right questions to create interesting interviews. And so one of those is what I just said, like ask the thing that seems weird, ask the thing that seems strange to you. Don't be afraid to sound like an idiot, to sound like someone who doesn't know anything about it, doesn't know what they're talking about. I think the other thing is like, ask the thing that you want to know, that you feel a little bad that you want to know, right? Yeah. Like if you're asking about, if someone's telling you like, so I went on a date with a girl I met on Tinder last night, and and he starts telling you a story about like where they went on the date. Like the appropriate thing to ask is like, you know, like, oh, you're single? Like, tell me about, like, how long have you been dating? What's your strategy to dating? I guess, like, it depends on the podcast, right? But like, the thing you really want to know is like, wait, was she hot? Like, how did you get lucky? Like, how did the date go? You know, like,
what do you eat? Like, you know,
like that's the great thing about a podcast is like, sometimes people are going to be like, I'm not answering that. Like, I'm not telling you that, you know? And that's okay. Like, ask those questions. Like, I think that's a good framework is like at least 5 to 10% of your questions, people shouldn't answer. People should be like, next, I'm not answering that. That lets you know that you're asking good questions.
Yes, I love that, man. That reminds me of the conversation between Sean and, what's his name? The comedian. I forgot his name. He has the Netflix special. Yeah, Hassan. And he keeps telling all the time, he's like, man, it's not like a regular podcast. It's like, it was just, I felt like we were just having a conversation, you know, over a drink or over food, whatever. And I'm like, that's how we should feel. Like, at least we didn't want it to be like this formality of like, and today we have this person that has won X amount of, you know, prizes. Like, no, man, let's make this fun. Let's, you know, craft an intro that hopefully brings a smile on the guest. And then, we're not drinking here, but it's like, okay, let's imagine we're having let's imagine we're having a conversation, you know, over dinner with like some good friends. And I think that makes it so much more interesting, kind of like leaning towards your personality, like who you are. Yet I feel like people are afraid of doing that, right? A little bit. Like why do you think people are afraid of, let me just show myself as I am, right?
Yeah, I think, I think part of it is like, is an actual struggle there is a little bit of tension there in that, like Sam and Sean, every single time they hop on the mic, they're like, what's up, dude? Hey, by the way, like I was working out and da 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 da. And every single time, me as a producer, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna lose listeners for 30 seconds because like no one wants to hear about your stupid workout. Okay, like people want to hear about business ideas and people want to hear about entrepreneurship and what's happening in the news. Like you guys talk about your workouts so much and no one cares. But like that is what makes the show great. Is that it really is just them talking about whatever they would talk about. Okay. Yeah. So like there is a little tension there, but usually you should default towards just like talking about whatever it is that you would talk about.
Yeah. I love it.
But knowing that like you do have to balance it somewhat.
We have a fourth guest here today. Atlas the Husky is asking me to open the door. I'll be back.
Yeah, the dog is like, please let me out, man. I've been here in this hot room for a while. Ben, man, like this has been absolutely amazing. I know we're running a little bit out of time, but this is the question that I've been wanting to ask all day, you know. So for those listening, if you don't like the question, make sure you send me a DM and we'll go at it. But dude, like, how long does it take you to read, put together these episodes? Like the work that goes behind your podcast, man, like it just honestly blows my mind. And how fast do you read? Because, you know, I'm a pretty slow reader and I love reading, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I cannot consume that much information like that quickly or what it seems to be, right?
So I actually just found a hack that helps me read way faster, much, much faster, which has been really cool for me. Because I was, it's actually, I don't know, it's probably sped up my process 30%. It's awesome hack. I'll tell you guys about it. But yeah, so I spend, so like for Walt Disney, I read 3 books. One was 600, one was 300. Oof. One was, how long was the third one? Yeah, probably 300 or 400 pages.
Wow.
And so I probably did, and then I do some other background research, right? And kind of like learn about the time. So I probably do like 20 to 30 to 40 hours of reading, and then another like 10 to 15 hours of, well, I've been cutting it down actually, which is great. Another 5 hours, let's say, of scripting, and then an hour of narrating. And now I don't do my own editing anymore. But back when I was doing my own audio editing, that was another couple hours. So it's a lot of time that goes into each episode.
Yeah.
The hack, I'll tell you, that has helped me go so fast is I had to read really slow because I'm taking notes as I go, because I have to say this stuff again, right?
The light bulb moments.
I have to, I have to remember all this stuff, and I like not just like remember it in general, but like I got to know the dates, and I got to know, you know, the names, the actual proper names, and I gotta have quotes that I want to pull and that I want to say later. So I had been taking notes, which slowed me down so much to take all these notes. What I've started doing, and I actually learned this from Napoleon. So it's it's coming back to help me in the podcast. Is I now just hit record, and I'm recording a voice memo, and I just say, as I'm reading, I just say the stuff that I'm thinking. Every time I have a cool insight, I'm like, wow, this is cool. I literally just say the thing that I think is cool. Every time I read a quote that I think is like, oh, this is awesome, I just read the quote out loud. And so I have all this stuff saved on like a 20-hour voice memo, right? And then I have transcription software that I upload it into transcription software. It's Descript. It's really cool. And then I can auto delete all the silences. So it takes like 20 hours of me just reading and speaking out loud, trims all the silences. It then becomes just like an hour and a half of me talking, and it's all transcribed so I can just read it. And I have all my notes right there for me. That has sped it up so much.
Wow. Oh, okay. Hold on. I know. Hold on.
Yeah.
I know that. Yeah. And that one deserves
That's
that one
amazing.
too.
I love it. I'm into
so cool.
I'm into the whole like note taking, second brain, settle casting. I don't know if you heard about all that stuff. So I feel like this is a key hack for that. Something I've actually started doing it that it has been helpful for me to like read a little bit faster. I read very slow. Let me tell you, like very, very slow. I don't want to put the excuse that it's because I read in English and it's my second language, but you know, I'm just going to put it out there. Who knows? But something I started doing is I downloaded this app. I think it's called Dream Reader. I'm not 100% sure, but pretty much what it does is I can upload it's kind of like Whisper Sync for Audible and Kindle, which you can have the ebook and you can have the audiobook at the same time. And I can speed up the audiobook, and it shows me kind of like the reference in the ebook of where it is, and it helps me comprehend and read it faster, because now I'm not regressing with my eyes and all that stuff. And I think that's absolutely amazing. I love your process though with the Note app, and just so like good. Talking to it and putting your thoughts in there and then condensing everything immediately in one platform. I think is absolutely genius.
Okay, we have two last questions, but like final reflection on this. Please, if you're listening and you consume a ton of content, this is probably a great way. In my head, I'm already like, I need to do this tonight, because I do consume a lot of like, I don't read much. I listen, but I watch a lot of YouTube videos about the things that we do, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Or another creators, right? Like we talked about Eric and Mr. Beast and like their frameworks. And as we watch the videos, this method is so powerful too, because the light bulb moments come not as I'm reading, but as I'm watching this video, and it's probably very useful to do that. And sometimes
you make fun of me, but that's why I keep this thing with me all the time.
But this is gonna change at least my content consumption / processing / content creation side so much. Ben, this was like, if we have to scrap the whole interview, like this alone was so worth it. So thank you. I'm gonna put that. We normally ask about an action point. This has to be an action point for the people listening and that are creating content. Go consume whatever you're consuming and do this hack that Ben just shared with us. So we're going to call it the Ben hack. The Ben hack. Awesome. All right, Ben, last questions. I know down to the end actually is one question that we have now, because I just answered the other one. Where would you be if you never published?
Where would I be if I never published? Okay, so... I don't know, but I do know where I was before I published, right? Which was, I had done tech marketing, like I said. I had joined a startup. The startup was in the process of going under and shutting down. My girlfriend had just broken up with me. I was living in my parents' basement, and I didn't know what I was doing with life. Like I truly, I was not going anywhere. I just took the LSAT, which is the test to get into law school, because I was like, man, this all sucks. Maybe I'll just go to law school. Long story short, I bombed. I did horrible. I'm a really good test taker. I scored well on the SATs. I always score really well on tests. I did horrible. I was like so depressed. Like everything in my life was failing. And the day that I decided to start How to Take Over the World, my first podcast, everything has just been up and to the right. Everything has been better for me. And so I would say not only has it moved me in the right direction, but it's helped point me in the right direction. I think finding out what you want to create, what you want to say, what you want to talk about helps you figure out what you want to do in life. And so not only does it help move you, but it helps you find where you want to move to. If I had never published, then I don't know. I know I'd be less happy and less successful. That's all I know.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. The reason we asked this question is, first, hopefully it's like a little kick in the butt for that person listening that, might be debating whether they should be publishing, if they feel like they have a message inside that they want to share, right? Put it out there. And then second is honestly a little selfish, but for ourselves, we're like, man, when we hear people, just like you, Ben, that have created incredible companies and have helped, we didn't even talk about how do you go to 2 million downloads per month, right? Like that's going to have to be part 2. I'm just dropping that out there.
Yeah. But,
it's motivation at the end, right? It's like we listen to your words and, motivation, it translates like the exact meaning of the word is a reason to act, right? If you take the root words, reason to take action, right? And this is a reason to take action for us. We listen to your story, how it all started. Now, again, your transformation, right? That Epiphany Bridge story, right? How it turned you into who you are right now, what you do, and how you're enjoying life, and all these great things. And at the end of the day, it helps us move forward as well.
But I want to share a fun fact. So on our cheat sheet, as we do this interview, you probably saw us like typing something, or probably me, FONZI, write some notes. We have a code with the team on when to select this light bulb funny like blooper moments to the micro assets, right? The code is a bunch of exclamation points next to the sentence that I wrote, or the phrase that I wrote. Your notes are full of exclamation points. And it's like, and they're gonna have a hard time choosing.
It's gonna be tough.
It's gonna be so good. So I just want to say thank you, man. Like this was such a great conversation. Thank you for coming on to Content is Profit.
Yeah.
The announcements that we have to make sometime in these next couple of days are going to unite probably us a little bit more. So can't wait. I don't know if we can talk behind cameras, but dude, it was so awesome. Where can people find you? Where can people connect? Where do we send them?
If you want to listen to How to Take Over the World, just search How to Take Over the World wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to connect with me, I'm Ben Wilson Tweets on Twitter.
Awesome. I don't think I'm connected with you on Twitter, so I'm about to go on and connect.
You're not connecting with anybody on Twitter.
Ben, one last thing I've been wanting to add the whole conversation. Have you ever been told that you look like Loki? Like Tom, what's his name? Tom Hiddleston? Tom Hiddleston.
As soon as you said, have you ever been told you look like, I knew the end of the sentence was Tom Hiddleston. Yes.
That's awesome. Man, thank you so much for everything, Ben. Anything you want to add before we head out, both of you?
Ben?
I had a ton of fun. I seriously did. And not only a ton of fun, but I thought your questions were super insightful. And I found, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, man. It means so much.
Thank you. I think that's it, man. I mean, I can't top that one.
Yeah.
Well, with that said, thank you so much for tuning into the Content is Profit podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite platforms and on social media at BIZBROS Co.
That is right. And if Ben here helped you move one step closer towards your goal, please don't forget to share this episode and leave a 5-star review. See ya.
Bye, guys.